Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty complex.
Really naughty stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Why politicians lie, and maybe more importantly, why we as a society often seem to, well, let it slide.
We got some fascinating material sent in by a listener.
We did, including excerpts from something called an AI Anatomy of Political Lies and Societal Tolerance.
And we're using that as a kind of guidepost today.
Think of it as our way to really understand the mechanisms behind this whole phenomenon without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Right. And what's really unique here is looking at this through an AI lens, as the source puts it.
What does that really mean, though, an AI lens?
Well, it's about looking for patterns, systems, how lies are constructed, how they spread, how we react. Almost like analyzing code, but for, human behavior.
Okay. So it might show us things we wouldn't normally see.
Exactly. Some surprising angles on a problem that's, let's face it, been around forever.
So our mission today.
Pull out the key insights. Give you, the listener, a clear picture of what these sources suggest without drowning you in data.
All right, let's dig in. First thing that jumps out from the sources, this tolerance, it's not new.
Yeah.
At all.
No, far from it. You look back, ancient Rome, they had their propaganda.
Sure.
20th century totalitarian regimes, masters of misinformation.
And now today, it's just constant, isn't it? Online, everywhere.
It really is. It seems like a recurring theme in human history.
And one of you listeners actually sent in a great analogy for this, something about vitamins and nutrition.
Yeah, I liked that one. It captures how people often accept narratives, maybe without hard proof if they promise something needed.
Like stability.
Or security.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
just, a feeling that things will be okay. It taps into that fundamental human desire for well-being, even if the story itself is a bit shaky.
Okay, now this is where, for me, it gets really fascinating. The AI anatomy source starts digging into our biology, our psychology, suggesting that our actual evolutionary wiring plays a part in this tolerance. It's pretty compelling. Think about our need for social cohesion, for belonging to a group.
Okay.
Sometimes that drive to belong can actually be stronger than our commitment to, strict factual truth.
So biases come into play.
Big time. Confirmation bias, for instance. Our brains seem hardwired to notice and remember info that confirms what we already think.
Like a filter.
Pretty much. And then there's in-group bias. We naturally favor people in our own group, our
Right.
tribe, whatever you want to call it.
And we trust them more, maybe.
Yeah.
Even if they're not being entirely straight.
It can happen. These biases can make us more open to accepting falsehoods if they come from our side or reinforce our group identity. It's like, our brain gives it a pass if it helps us feel connected.
Wow. Okay. And it's not just how we think, right? The source mentions our physical stress response, too.
Yeah, the idea that we have a natural biological reaction when we detect deception, like an internal alarm bell. But, and this is the worrying part, chronic exposure, being lied to again and again, can actually blunt that response.
So the alarm bell gets quieter.
Or we just stop paying attention to it. It's like our internal lie detector gets worn out.
That really raises some serious questions, doesn't it? If we're constantly bombarded, are we basically being trained to accept it, to become less sensitive?
It's a definite risk. What happens to accountability if our natural alarm system is sort of offline?
Let's switch to the psychology then. The AI anatomy really goes deep here. Cognitive dissonance, for example.
Ah, yes. That uncomfortable feeling when you encounter something that totally clashes with what you believe.
Right. And the source says sometimes the easiest way out of that discomfort
Is to just accept the lie or rationalize it away. It's often easier than fundamentally rethinking your whole worldview.
avoids the mental gymnastics,
Exactly. And tied into that is emotional reasoning.
where feelings trump facts.
Pretty much. If a lie feels right, if it resonates with your anger or your hope or your frustration,
Be more likely to buy it.
much more likely, regardless of logic. It's like your gut takes over the steering wheel from your brain.
And then there's the cynicism factor, just getting worn down by it all.
Absolutely. You hear so many conflicting stories, so much apparent dishonesty that it's tempting to just throw your hands up.
And assume everyone's lying.
Yeah, they're all the same,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, which is a really slippery slope, as you said earlier. Well, if the public just expects lies, where's the incentive for politicians to be truthful? Cynicism can almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Which links into motivated reasoning, I suppose.
Directly. That's our tendency to actively seek out information that confirms what we already believe and, crucially, to interpret ambiguous information in a way that supports our side.
So we're not passive recipients, we're actively filtering.
Very actively. And our core belief systems, political ideologies, nationalism, religious beliefs, they act as incredibly powerful filters. They shape what information even gets through, let alone what we accept as true.
So it's not just our internal psychology. There are bigger frameworks, philosophical ideas too.
Right. The source brings in thinkers like Plato, Machiavelli, Hannah Arendt.
Big names.
And they were all grappling with this tension between truth and deception in politics centuries ago.
What did they add to the picture?
Well, questions like, is there ever such a thing as a justifiable lie in politics? A noble lie, as Plato called it.
Tricky one.
Very. And Arendt warned powerfully about how systemic lying destroys the trust needed for any kind of public life. These aren't new anxieties.
And on a more basic level, the source mentions logical fallacies.
Yes. Political lies often rely on flawed arguments. Things like ad hominem attacks, straw man arguments, false dilemmas.
The kind of stuff you learn about in, like, a critical thinking class.
Exactly. And if we, as citizens, aren't very good at spotting those fallacies, we're much easier targets for manipulation. They exploit weaknesses in how we process arguments.
Okay, this next part is interesting. The source uses metaphors from physics and math.
Yeah, it's a way to offer different perspectives. They're analogies, of course, not literal science.
Like the butterfly effect.
Right. The idea that a seemingly small lie, a tiny distortion of truth, could potentially ripple outwards and have huge unforeseen consequences down the road.
Makes sense. And the observer effect.
That's about how the act of watching, of scrutinizing politicians, can actually change their behavior regarding truthfulness.
So transparency matters because it makes them think twice.
Potentially, yes. If they know they're being watched closely, the calculation might shift.
And game theory. The prisoner's dilemma. How does that fit?
It helps explain why individuals or groups might rationally choose to engage in deception, even if it leads to a worse outcome for everyone overall.
Because they fear being exploited if they are honest, or they see a short-term gain.
Exactly. It models that tension between individual self-interest and collective well-being in a system where trust is fragile and deception offers a perceived edge.
And finally, mathematical modeling, like epidemiology.
Yeah, thinking about how misinformation spreads through a population like a virus.
So you can track it, model its spread.
Potentially. Understand the dynamics of how false narratives take hold and propagate through social networks. It gives us a different kind of analytical tool.
Let's shift to human reactions. The source talks about the whole range, laughing at lies, crying, getting angry.
Yeah, our emotional responses are really diverse. But then it gets into this idea of purposeful tolerance.
Meaning we sometimes choose to tolerate lies knowingly.
It suggests so. And this brings us back to that vitamins analogy again.
Okay.
Sometimes we might tolerate a lie because we believe, rightly or wrongly, that it serves some kind of greater good.
Like what?
Maybe maintaining group cohesion, sticking together, is seen as more important than absolute truth, or gaining a strategic advantage for our side.
Or maybe just exhaustion.
That too. Feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information and the effort required to constantly sort fact from fiction. Sometimes tolerating the lie feels like the path of least resistance.
It's like thinking, okay, maybe it's not quite right, but it helps us win, or it keeps things calm, or just, I can't deal with arguing about this anymore.
Precisely. It can feel like a necessary compromise, even if it's based on a falsehood.
The source also touches on development, how we learn about deception as we grow up.
Right. We're not born understanding lies. It's something we figure out, usually starting in early childhood and developing through adolescence.
So our tolerance for political lies is partly learned.
Very likely, yes. It's shaped by our environment, by what we see modeled around us, by how truth and lies are treated in our families, schools, and society.
Which brings us squarely to ethics. What are the real costs of tolerating political dishonesty?
They're significant. At a fundamental level, it undermines informed consent in a democracy. If people are making decisions based on lies, how meaningful is their participation?
Good point.
And it raises questions about our own complicity. If we know lies are being told and we don't push back, are we enabling the erosion of trust?
So who benefits most when lies are tolerated?
Well, the sources point to a few usual suspects. The politicians or parties using the lies, obviously. Specific interest groups who might fund or push those narratives. Partisan media outlets that profit from reinforcing biases. And sometimes, even individuals whose own prejudices feel validated by the lies.
Okay, let's talk about AI. Because the source suggests it might actually offer some ways to maybe counter this.
Yes, this is a really interesting and potentially hopeful part of the analysis.
What can AI do?
Well, think about enhanced fact-checking on a massive scale, analyzing vast amounts of text and video, potentially spotting misinformation much faster.
Including deepfakes, which are getting scarily good.
Exactly. AI could be crucial in detecting those kinds of sophisticated fakes. And beyond detection, it could help improve information literacy by developing tools that help people learn to identify manipulative language, logical fallacies, and unreliable sources themselves, empowering people.
Like a digital critical thinking tutor.
Something like that. And it could also boost transparency.
In what way?
Imagine AI tools that automatically track politicians' promises versus their actual actions, or analyze campaign finance data to show who's really influencing policy.
Pulling back the curtain a bit.
Right, and maybe even help us understand belief dynamics better, how ideas spread, why certain narratives stick.
The source even mentioned AI contributing to a better logic about life and lies. That sounds a bit abstract.
It is a bit philosophical, but the idea is that AI, being non-emotional, could analyze the long-term consequences of deception versus truth-telling in a more objective way.
So contrasting the fleeting gains from a political lie with more enduring human values like trust or cooperation.
Sort of, yeah. It could offer a different data-driven perspective on the actual cost of dishonesty beyond the immediate political game.
Now, the listener who sent the sources raised some really specific human concerns, like why some seemingly cruel people might ignore political lies but still engage in violence.
That's a tough one. The source suggests that for someone deeply invested in an extremist ideology, the normal framework of political truth might just not apply in the same way.
Their moral compass is already skewed.
Severely. Their actions are driven by that ideology, not necessarily by weighing the truth value of everyday political statements. However, political lies can still be incredibly useful tools for them. Lies used to dehumanize opponents, to justify hatred, to make violence seem not just acceptable, but necessary within their distorted view.
Grim. What about the idea of being born without a sense of political lies?
The source paints that as making someone incredibly vulnerable. Our ability to detect deception, even instinctively, is a basic social survival skill.
So without it in the political realm,
You'd be wide open to manipulation, exploitation. It's a fundamental defense mechanism in a complex social world.
and this concept of a necessary human belief in political lies, is that real?
Well, the source argues it often feels necessary for comfort, for group identity, for perceived advantage. But is it objectively necessary? Probably not.
It becomes normalized.
Exactly. Especially when questioning the lies seems too risky, too difficult, or just not worth the effort. It's perceived a necessity driven by psychological or social factors, not objective need.
And the different reactions, laughing versus taking offense, that really drives polarization, doesn't it?
It absolutely can. What one person brushes off as political gamesmanship, another sees as a serious betrayal of trust. Our values and experiences dictate our reactions, and that gap can widen divisions.
Then there was that big, almost metaphysical question. Could life itself be seen as a lie?
Whoa, deep. The source treats that more metaphorically. It distinguishes between, say, camouflage and nature deception for survival and intentional, complex human political lying with its moral dimensions.
So they're not really the same thing.
Not directly, but the question pushes us to think about how we construct meaning and truth in our lives. Are our own narratives always 100% accurate? It's provocative.
The source also mentioned AI may be helping with mental health support related to political stress.
Yeah, the idea that AI could power tools or platforms to help people cope with the anxiety and stress that comes from navigating this landscape.
Like connecting people, offering resources.
Exactly. Building resilience against manipulation, maybe offering ways to engage constructively instead of just feeling overwhelmed or angry.
And the physical toll, that's real too.
Apparently so. The constant stress of trying to discern truth, feeling lied to, dealing with the resulting conflict it can manifest physically. Stress-related illnesses. It's not just in our head.
Which connects to that paradox. The freedom some feel in just believing a convenient lie.
Versus the actual freedom that comes from having accurate information and thinking for yourself.
Right. It seems like freedom, but is it?
The source suggests true intellectual freedom requires access to reality, or at least the best available information, and the skills to analyze it. Embracing a comforting lie might feel liberating in the moment, but it's ultimately a kind of self-imposed limitation.
And lastly, why don't we teach kids explicitly about political lies?
Good question. The source suggests a mix of reasons. It's complicated stuff. Parents might have their own biases.
Or want to shield kids.
Yeah, protect their innocence. Plus, there isn't really a standard curriculum for detecting political BS 101.
Maybe there should be.
Given today's information environment, the argument for equipping young people with those critical thinking skills seems stronger than ever.
So wrapping this part up, AI emerges as a potential tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a magic bullet, but something that could help.
Definitely a tool. It can help with verification, spotting patterns, boosting literacy, lots of potential. But it's still just a tool. We can't outsource critical thinking entirely. Addressing this requires human agency, education, a commitment from us to value truth. AI won't fix it on its own.
Okay. So after this really deep dive through psychology, history, philosophy, even physics analogies, it's clear why politicians lie and why we tolerate it is, well, it's complicated.
Massively complicated. No easy answers, that's for sure. The reasons are layered, interconnected.
So maybe the final thought for you, listening, is to reflect on all this. Think about your own susceptibility. We all have these biases, right?
Nobody's immune.
So knowing these mechanisms are at play, how might you approach political information differently now? How do you filter? How do you react?
And maybe, what's your role? What can individuals do to nudge things towards a more truth-seeking environment?
Big questions. Definitely something to chew on.
For sure.
Well, thanks again to the listener who sent in the sources that sparked this whole discussion.
Yeah, great material.
We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable perspectives. Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And share any other thoughts that come up. Thanks for tuning in.
This is DigitView.